Hi, I'm Glenn Dakin, writer of the Scooby-Doo Essential Guide, and you're listening to a podcast named Scooby-Doo.
Yeah!
Hey gang, and welcome to another episode of A Podcast Named Scooby-Doo, the show that attempts to unravel 50 years of mysteries, meddling kids, and masked villains. My name is Mike Josick, and I'll be your guide through all things ghostly and groovy as I investigate every angle of every mystery and beyond. So grab yourself some Scooby snacks, fire up the mystery machine, and let's start the show. On this installment of A Podcast Named Scooby-Doo, I've got another great interview lined up for you guys. It's probably a familiar voice to you, and a definite friend of the show, Be Cool Scooby-Doo staff writer, Tom Konkle. Now, you probably recognize Tom's name from his first season Be Cool episode, Area 51 Adjacent, or perhaps from, I think one or two of his season 2 episodes have trickled out sporadically somewhere in the globe, so some of you may have run across Murder on the Disorient Express, or Do Not Disturb. And of course, Tom was the first guest that I ever had on my first episode of the podcast. Now, a funny thing happened on the way to putting together this show. I actually had another interview lined up. It's recorded and actually ready to go. But when I was talking to Tom, I realized that we were conducting our interview almost exactly a year from when we had our first conversation. In fact, when I went in to edit the file, I actually pulled the wrong file because I recognized the date as the day that I was doing the editing, and when I put it into my audio editor, I was like, oh, this sounds familiar, and I just thought that was kind of cool. And considering November 12th is the show's birthday, the show's anniversary, and Tom was our first guest, and just with the way some of the logistics turned out, the idea was to put Tom's episode out now, not officially the anniversary, technically a couple weeks away, but in my mind close enough, because I'm also going to kind of plus it, kind of have a bit of an addendum. Tom was kind enough to record another commentary on the show, and we did the Murder on the Disorient Express episode. So what I'm going to do is, to celebrate the actual anniversary of the show, I'm going to release Tom's commentary on the 12th of November, 2017, for anyone listening to this in the future. So you're getting the interview now, the commentary in a couple of weeks, and then near the end of November, you're going to get the interview that I'd originally planned to run in October, which is a conversation that I had with Glenn Dakin, who is the writer of the Scooby-Doo Essential Guide that came out back in 2004. He's also written like a ton of other stuff. You've probably run across his work if you're into sci-fi fantasy, comic books, dark fantasy, or Shaun the Sheep, or Bob the Builder. He's worked on both of those. He was quite pleased to talk Scooby-Doo with me because he said most people that call him, they want to talk Shaun the Sheep, and he doesn't usually get to talk Scooby-Doo. So that conversation will be coming at you in about a month's time. I've got Glenn doing the show ID at the beginning. You probably noticed it on your way in. So that'll be cool when that happens. And I've actually started lining up probably like a half a dozen other interviews, some that people I'd spoken to previously, and some brand new people that I've started wrangling up. I'm really excited going into year 2, what we're going to be doing, and the people that I'm getting, and the conversations that I'm going to be having. For anyone who's following the show's Twitter feed, I made a comment about possibly doing some interviews with people who worked on or are working on the DC Hanna-Barbera line of books. I'm really enjoying the stuff that they're putting out. And since the mandate of the show is Scooby first, but also I am interested in kind of looking at, other Hanna-Barbera properties and the DC Hanna-Barbera books. Of course, you've got Rough and Ready, Dick Dastardly and Muttley, Scooby-Doo, Wacky Raceland, Flintstones. Some of these books are without peer. They're literally like some of the best things that I've read all year. I just wanted to talk to some of the people behind them and find out a little bit more about how the line came together and where the line's going and the approaches to the books. So I haven't quite figured out exactly what I'm going to do with that, but going into year 2 of the show, going into 2018, I'm gonna chase that muse. I'm going to expand sort of the parameters of the show, who I talk to, and who knows what else. Time and endurance willing. So I should probably quit the blathering because this is a long one. This is longer than the usual interviews. I figured since it was, sort of an anniversary show, I would let it run pretty much, just about an hour. The way my conversation with Tom went, we talked about Tom's movie, Trouble Is My Business. Then we talked about some Scooby-Doo. Then Tom gave us a little bit of an exclusive surprise, which I'm not going to spoil. And then we talked about Tom's book, Red Skies, which came out last month or the month before last. Again, anybody following the Twitter feed, you've probably seen me retweeting Trouble Is My Business and Red Skies. And there just wasn't really a good place to cut it. So I thought I'm just going to run Tom's interview in its entirety. It's, anniversary celebration and all that. So just a heads up, it's going to be a bit of a long show. So I'm going to stop talking your ear off. I'm going to let you get to the conversation, and I will see you guys on the other side.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Anyway, it's good to hear from you.
Yeah. You were talking about the movie. The movie's done.
Movie is done. We got accepted in the Valley Film Festival. We created a projection file of it. It's a 5.1 surround sound. It shows on the 28th of October. I'm super excited to, first time ever world premiere, seeing it with an audience, something that I directed, co-wrote, and act in.
So are you trying to take it the festival circuit first before any kind of official release? Are you looking for distribution?
No, I have distribution. The film comes out April of 2018. It's distributed by a company called The Orchard, which is a worldwide digital distribution platform. And then the home videos are Sony Home Entertainment.
Very cool.
Yeah, so we made that deal last month. So this is really just a victory lap sort of thing. And if I do any festival stuff, it's for fun. Some festivals don't accept a film if it already has distribution, which is a good problem to have. So I'm like, oh, okay. Really, it's also to get reviews. We had our first review come in,
right,
and it was really good. I was actually choked up. I read, because I've been working on it for 3 years. So I read it, and the guy got it. He gave me a 4 out of 4, and he just totally got the film. And it's so gratifying because you don't know. At some point, I'm like, is this any good? It's like,
yeah, when you're living with it for that long.
Yeah, I've seen it over 1,000 times, And so to read somebody else go, hey, I like this, it was just very gratifying, and I'm kind of buried right now delivering it, because at the end of a film everyone kind of leaves, and usually the creator on an indie film is the one left. So I'm the one getting the captioning, I'm the one looking through the paperwork, I'm the one cleaning up the files and sending the stuff, and it's the not glamorous part of being the filmmaker. But it has to get done, but without help, it's quite overwhelming. I find myself working on it very late at night, to try and just get stuff done.
So when you get the home video release, are there going to be any special features?
I don't know. I've pushed to have a dual release. If they do the Blu-ray the way I want, it will be a color and black and white version of the film.
Nice.
Which 2 separately timed versions. It will be color timed and look for black and white, which is sort of what I really wanted, and then color, which is the commercial concession. But the color I ended up playing with, this guy Michael Smith, who's my business partner on it. He knows color, he's a colorist, so he and I kind of made a map, and I was like, I really want the outdoor to feel like this, the indoor to feel like that. So we found a cool look to the film. So color doesn't bother me as much as it did, because the color doesn't look just like everyday kind of color, it looks special. So that will be it. As far as extras, there'll probably be a commentary at some point that, we'll record just to kind of show the scope of what we tried to do. I didn't have consistently anybody behind the scenes really shooting anything, which is unfortunate, but, it was either that or not finished the film. so I was like, yeah, I have somebody do that or just keep shooting. So a lot of it was not documented, which is a shame. But, next time with other people's money, I will have somebody do that.
Well, there's a precedent for the black and white now. There's been a couple of movies. I mean,
yeah,
Logan,
much
bigger movies, but
beautiful. Yeah. The one that really inspired me was the Mad Max Fury Road one. Looks amazing.
I haven't seen that one yet. Yeah.
George Miller cut that film in black and white. It was always intended to be black and white. He was pressured to retime it in color, so the black and chrome version of it is actually what he cut the music and everything to originally. Like, that's the version he meant to have out, and it's spectacular.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember back, years ago now, when Frank Darabont had a special collector's edition of The Mist, and it had the black and white version on it.
Yes, I do remember that. Yeah, there's something magical. What I like about black and white is it's one step removed. Like, it's already dreamlike, and it already creates a little bit of separation from reality. And in some films, that just makes it much more magical to me, because it just isn't documenting everyday life. It then becomes an abstraction. Like, you notice the shapes and the shadows and the faces and the contours so much more because you're not processing that color information. Like, I love, when color is well used, but if it's just, looking like a regular video, it's not that special unless you do something with it. And I just love that look. And one of the things I think the reason that Trouble with My Business works in black and white is it just makes it that extra dreamlike quality, that because I made it to seem like, it was a classical film noir. Like, it's not a winking nod, kind of modern version where you kind of know you're in it. It's like, no, if I was in 1947 and I wanted to make a noir, that's the one I would have made. And in black and white, it becomes an abstraction of that, which is really cool.
I was going to bring up the noir thing too, and just say, like, so much of the DNA. I mean, that chiaroscuro look. It's tailor-made for the black and white.
People ask me, why did I do that as my first feature film? And I said, well, two reasons. I love the art form, but the second one was film noir is a pragmatic approach. MGM was like, hey, we spent $1 million on the set. We got to light it and you got to see it. But in film noir, you're like, okay, we have no money, so there's nothing on the wall, so don't light it. And just light the faces and have it fall off to black. And then DP started realizing, we can actually tell a story that way, and you can create a language that way that's new, with the shadows and take more chances with raked angles that in color you just couldn't do. But I'm doing the same thing. It's like, well, I can't afford the big MGM backlot stuff, so use the practical of film noir, which was you don't have any money, you got to tell a story. But then also, it's actually kind of cool to play with it because it's one of the few pure film languages. Like, you can turn the sound off and you still pretty much know the relationships between the characters and what's happening, because noir is its own soundtrack. Its own, the visual soundtrack to it is there.
Very cool.
That was fun. I learned a lot doing it, and people were so surprised that a comedy guy, I've been doing comedy for 24 years, but I chose that because noir is witty. Like, there's some very funny, giggle-worthy kind of dialogue back and forth. It's very dry, and it's for grown-ups. But comedy is, in the indie world, actually one of the hardest things to sell, because most of the money comes from overseas. And so unless you have incredibly gifted dubbers or incredibly gifted subtitlers, the humor references, can you imagine the humor references in some of the stuff that I write get completely lost on someone without those cultural references.
Interesting. Never thought of that.
Yeah, you can't sell it. We like British comedy because they're still speaking English, but we don't tend to embrace a lot of Amsterdam comedy because we don't get their references, and what they're saying doesn't translate. It's how they say it.
Yeah.
The funniest thing I ever, and then we can get into our thing, but the funniest thing I ever heard that made me go, of course, is, the whole joke of, like, Jerry Lewis was huge in France. He was considered a comic genius. Well, it turns out that the guy who had been dubbing him for, I think it was 45, 46 years, was an incredibly gifted voiceover artist who retranslated all of the jokes so that the French would get the timing, and he created a new thing. And then when he died, when they did a re-release of the Blu-rays, all the movies bombed because they didn't use those original mono tracks of this guy. And all they did was just a straight translation of what Jerry Lewis is saying. So you just have like, hey lady, nice lady, all in French. And the French are going, mon Dieu, this is not funny. So it was the guy who was translating him who was a genius, a comic genius, who was making those movies funny for the French. And I was like, of course, comedy is so subjective and so just seeped in whatever references you have. You know, you and I both kind of have a frame of reference. I think that's why we like Be Cool Scooby-Doo. It's like you'll get the reference. Oh, I get it. That's, you know, the one we're talking about today is, you know, Murder on the Orient Express, which is coming out as a Branagh film. You know, and it's like, if we don't know that literature, if you're in Bangladesh and you go, I have this hilarious satire of Murder on the Orient Express, they'll be like, and? And there's no laugh there, because the laugh isn't one of recognition. It's like, okay, you know.
I had that experience with, I don't know if you've ever heard of Cromartie High School.
No.
It was a Japanese manga, and I'd read the manga, and I thought the manga was hilarious, and there was an animated series, of course, based off of it.
Right.
And I'm a hardcore, you know, it's got to be subs.
Right.
I don't love, you know, dubs when I watch foreign stuff, and I'm sitting there and I'm reading these subtitles.
Yeah.
And I'm just not finding the show funny because
they're wrong. Yeah.
It's a lot. So much depends on the tone and the, like you said, the delivery and the timing. And
yeah.
So it's the only anime that I ever watch. It's probably the only foreign thing that I watch with the dubs, because
because you've got it. It's the timing and it's delivery. You're absolutely right. That is why I made the sort of business decision of all the movies I want to make. There's about 10 movies I want to make, but the reason I didn't do comedy when my background professionally was sketch comedy and writing for comedy was, you look at the landscape, it's like, oh, unless it's a Will Ferrell comedy and you got top drawer comedians, you know, dubbing it in all these other languages, like The Funniest Guy in Germany, this movie's going to flop. You know, there's no money. You'll never make a dime.
It's funny because most people would probably look at that and think you went not comedy because you don't want to just be seen as the comedy guy.
Yeah. No, it's a real business decision. A comedy would be much harder for me to make my money back on because it could only play here, not worldwide, and only English speaking, and wouldn't necessarily, no matter how funny it is, wouldn't necessarily even play worldwide to English speaking audiences, depending on the subject matter. You know, if it's something kind of universal, yes, it might work, but some of my ideas are kind of comedically more in the family of, you know, Be Cool type. I know for a fact, you know, in New Zealand they'd be like, what? and it just doesn't work. It's that can translate over and make a lot of money.
The more you know.
Yeah, the more you know. Well, yeah, it's partly a concession and partly, you know, like you say, I can do more than comedy, but I really did it for more practical reasons. So April of next year? April of next year rolls out. The company is the Orchard and Random Media. I'd happily have you mention those. That would be fantastic. They would be super pleased that it's getting. I'm trying to get the word out that it's coming out because, you know, it's coming out on all the digital platforms, and I don't need everyone to love it, just enough people. That's something I've been trying to do with, you know, I went and I saw Kate's movie, The Little Hours, and I thought it was hilarious. Yes. And, you know, you've got the book, you've got a movie, you know, John's got other stuff going on. Like, yeah, everybody's got other stuff. You've got to. You know, the Scooby stuff, as great as it is, doesn't always pay the bills, you know, and if you want, if you want a more broad look at how someone ended up at it, that's a great idea because, you're doing these other things, but you bring all that to the projects that you're doing. It's like because I did other projects and sketches, even the reason why I was the only staff writer is because John liked my other material, my other stuff.
And I've always been one of those people, too, who, like, if I like what you're doing here, I'll probably like what you're doing somewhere else. And
there's an aesthetic.
And one thing is kind of a gateway to, like, a half a dozen other things, and it just...
That is true. People's taste tends to be what they do. If you, follow somebody that you really like their work, they can branch out, and you're like, I found that, too. Or it's like, oh, I really like that. Like, it's almost like, yeah, I'll go there with you. But other people, you're like, really? You went to a Michael Bay film and you expected Shakespeare? That's what they do.
Now I want to see a Michael Bay Shakespeare movie.
It's probably never going to happen because I think he has no interest. That he's interested in kinetics. How he can move the camera. He moves it really well, but I think that's true. Like if you're a fan of Scooby and you can kind of take the totality of like how people come in and out of it and what they bring to the table, that's why each show's different. Like someone, from a mystery writing background is going to bring something different to it. Someone from sketch comedy, we obviously brought something really different to it. That kind of is what's cool about it, is it can different things. I always wondered why there was this, sometimes there's this pushback, about, you can't do a funny version of it, or you can't do a too serious version, or you can't do that. It's like, it's so malleable. It's a big tent. You can have, everyone can have a shot at doing something. There's not necessarily one right way to do it.
People get comfortable. They get comfortable with the one thing. I mean, even I took a little bit of getting used to with, like, Be Cool, because I was still in the Mystery Incorporated headspace.
Right.
Because that was the last thing that I saw.
Yeah, and they were much more Buffy, soapy kind of stuff with the relationships between the characters, and they had good mysteries, and the artwork was fantastic, and that was one way of doing it. And they brought that to the table.
I liked what they were doing for different reasons than what I loved, with what you guys were doing.
Yeah, I like that. The fact that a show can be that broadly interpreted is a tribute to how universal that concept works. If there was only one way to do it, I think, we'd be poorer for it. It would be still the same show it was in the 60s. And it probably wouldn't still be alive. It wouldn't be a living thing.
I'm still kind of amazed that the whole property made it through the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a time, as with most things, where just people don't know what to do with anything.
I think it's almost more of a tribute to the show that despite gross neglect, it's still persevered.
Exactly. Despite efforts to kill it.
I would love to see, there's been a lot of conversation about, like, the Scooby-Doo comic books.
Yeah.
Just kind of being, again, one of those things where they're putting them out just for the sake of putting them out. Like, there's very little effort being put into them.
Yeah.
And in the community, like, we're talking about, it'd be so cool to have, like, there's so many different iterations of Scooby-Doo. Like, have a Be Cool Scooby-Doo backup feature. Have a SDMI backup feature, like, play with the different eras and genres. And
yeah, you really could build a really fun universe of stuff if you actually were paying attention to it. Yes.
And I'm sure some of the people who worked on these shows would come back to write, like, a 10-page story.
Yeah. Given any incentive. I mean, honestly, John and I had a ton of great ideas where it's like, really, we don't get to keep going? And you just get kind of, like, held up, and no one's ever clear. No one actually wants to confront and say anything. And it's sort of like we were just hitting stride, but we were super surprised because you can imagine how excited we were to be on the lot at Warner Brothers doing a show, a classic show like that, which is what we do. We write comedy shows, and we were like, we're going to create a writer's room like the old days, your show of shows, with, Mel Brooks and, Woody Allen and all these funny people all in one room writing a show, and so for guys like us, we were like, but we just want to make good stuff. Can't we be funny and make stuff? So it was, I think we made as good as we could. And then at that point, it's sort of like, well, I'm not there. So,
It's also interesting looking at, like, just what everybody predicted would happen as we talked about it in season 1.
Yes.
It was like, you just gotta let people ease into it. Like, they'll get used to it, and they'll hear the jokes, they'll see the writing.
Yeah.
They'll appreciate it, and,
exactly.
The audience will grow.
Yeah.
People will
and that's
get into it, and they have been. The audience has definitely been growing. People are reviewing it online, and they're loving it.
I know, the irony is thick. It'd be like releasing The Simpsons and then hiding it for 2 years and then putting it on, like, a pay access cable somewhere. And you're like, hey, let's see if The Simpsons take it. People are like, hey, this show was pretty good. Are you going to do any more? Oh, no, we let everyone go several years ago. It's like, I think we got a hit here. I've noticed more people watching it now and tweeting it. One person sent me this super sweet, I don't know, it was either Scroogey-Doo or the one we were talking about, Disorient, and I was like, oh, great, and they're like, I cannot wait to see what else you come up with, and it just hurt to type, it's like, I'm not going to, because I've been gone.
And that's the other thing, like, those of us in the community, we know sort of the fate of the show. We've known for a really long time, but there's people out there who are going to be running into this show with no clue. They're just, Joe cartoon watcher buzzing through the Cartoon Network app or Teletoon or wherever it is, and it's like, oh, this is fantastic, and then it's over.
It breaks your heart when you get a piece of fan mail, because you open with the fan mail with, I'm glad you can't wait to see what else I'm going to do. I haven't been doing it, and I'm not ever going to, and it just drives you crazy, because it wasn't even one where it's like, hey, you had your shot, we gave a great rollout, season 2, we promoted it, and everyone watched it, and they just, there wasn't enough people buying it. It was never that case. It was just,
It's also been interesting just, like, getting into contact with you guys who've worked on the show, and, oh man, I can only remember his Twitter handle. The guy who did the original designs, Rick.
Oh, the animation guy. Yeah, Rick. Yeah. British guy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Richard Lee. His name was Richard Lee.
Yeah. British guy. We got along immediately because I had written and performed with John Cleese, and that was his favorite guy. Yeah. And he had a picture of him in there, and John goes, oh, by the way, Tom, you did Art of Football. John Cleese has performed sketch comedy with him. He's like, what? Good, all right, we've got to talk. And so we just started talking and stuff. And, he's a great guy, and just trying to create a different look, and, he took the brunt, as you know, of the look of the show.
I think they also released some promo work.
Too early.
Really early,
like early sketches, and I think there was no sort of planning of a rollout of how they were going to handle it or even explain why. So you get those drawings and then nothing to contextualize them, like, oh, this is going to be a funny Scooby-Doo. It's like, no, it's these drawings, and then everyone's going, so wait a minute, Mystery Incorporated, but they look like that, and you have to be very careful with stuff like that.
And I've heard both, like, John and Zach talk about the show and say the cartoony look of the show is to accommodate the broad humor, because if you had those classic, 69 Where Are You models doing some of this stuff, it would just not
It would
look
also,
right.
It's an odd phenomenon, it would feel like almost an Adult Swim redub version, where they took old animation and redub it. It would feel too much like that. Like, did they just redub an old episode? Because they're doing these weird things, but the animation is, retro or whatever. And it just wouldn't work. It's like, we're not doing Space Ghost, coast to coast. So it just didn't, it didn't work. And, they could have handled that. The artwork could have evolved. We could have gotten fan feedback. They could have actually made a joke out of that. The smart rollout would have been, hey, we're thinking about this, let's vote on it. Or, create your own thing. Or you send in your drawings of what you think they should look like and make it a fun, interactive thing. And then just modify it if it's overwhelmingly, if 9 out of 10 people go, we absolutely hate it, then you modify it a little bit.
But people also don't know what they want until they
see it. Exactly.
Consume it. Yeah.
And see.
And if you give them exactly what they think they want, then they're like, oh, all we ever get is,
the same old thing again.
The stuff we've seen.
Yeah, it looks exactly like the show from the 70s. Yeah. And it's like, well, you guys voted for it. Yeah, but you shouldn't listen to me. The artist's plight, It was a dark and stormy night. And then what happened?
I gotta say, watching Mysteries on the Disorient Express before talking to you, right off the bat, I mean, the line where this is still better than the Panther guy.
A Zamfir joke. Come on, you gotta give me that.
That episode still makes me laugh out loud when I'm watching it. Like,
still
it's
better
just,
than
it's honestly, it's one of my favorite episodes from season 2.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, see, I'm really sarcastic and sardonic. I can be wickedly mean sometimes, but I try and do it in a funny way, and it's like, come on, it's a pan flute.
It really felt like, okay,
yeah.
Tom showed us what he could do in Area 51, and then he's like, I've got to.
I wanted to eviscerate several things, and one of them, of course, was the Agatha Christie, mystery. But I thought, well, not in the obvious way, because it's already been done as parody. But I did it as, be careful what you wish for. In Fred's case, it's like, oh, you want a mystery? Well, here's Tengu. Okay, well, you want another mystery? Here's this guy. And then I thought, well, that would be interesting. And then John and I were talking about, Daphne, and we just started laughing in the car so hard we could not breathe. That the idea of, oh my God, can you smell that vista? And then the thing that finally put over the edge is I used to do this show called Invention with Brian Forbes, and I played this British scientist, and sometimes I called him Dr. Mesmer. So Dr. Mesmer's on the train, and I started telling this tale, and my brain just kind of snapped, and I'm driving John home because he didn't have his car that day, and we started talking about the nostril transplant. It's like, this nostril needs to get to the hospital, or, he won't be able to breathe. It's a mononostril, really. There's not two of them. And I'm doing the character because I used to do it. I was supposed to play Dr. Mesmer in that episode.
The great thing is it's like you just explained. I mean, it starts with puns, and it goes all over. I mean, there's no single sort of style of humor or thing you're picking fun at, or you just never give the viewer the opportunity to achieve any kind of equilibrium.
Yes, it's inevitable
in the best possible way.
And that I like, where it's just off kilter enough it should be one note ahead of you, where you're like, well, wait a minute, he just did a thank you, you're welcome joke. Now he's doing a nostril transplant joke. And
I was just going to say, even the lowest hanging fruit, the Tengu joke, it still makes me laugh every single time.
Because it made me laugh. It was 2 a.m. in the back, in my sunroom of my house, and I'm looking up real monsters, and I saw Tengu, and I was like, Tengu, you're welcome. And I'm like, okay, now the only way that makes sense is to do it at no less than 12 times until you get exhausted by 7 and you're laughing again by 12.
Yep.
And John, and to his credit, John did let it go with that. It was sort of like he laughed, but he felt guilty. And he's like, okay, I see what you're trying to do here. And then we both giggled, and then I had him convulsed in the passenger seat of my car because we were doing Dr. Mesmer transporting this nostril transplant, in a bell jar somewhere. It's like that's the MacGuffin. The train can't stop because this nostril must get to the hospital. You don't realize the exchange of oxygen that needs to happen here,
It was almost disappointing. My expectations got set so high that when I found out you wrote the Christmas episode, I was like, all right, sit back and just let it go. But the Christmas episode was so much calmer.
Well, I'll tell you why. There is one really funny Christmas episode script that I wrote. It is some of the fun, like literally I share, at the time I was doing that, they pushed me out of my office by myself, and I was with the people that were the tweeners doing the backgrounds and doing some of the other stuff sitting with me. And so during their lunch, we were down to 2 offices at that point, and John was in the closet and I was in the office with them. And over lunch, I performed the Christmas episode because it was just before Christmas the previous year that I wrote it. And so as a Christmas thing, while they were all eating their lunch, I did it, and we were laughing until we were crying because it starts with this Python-esque argument between I wish you could read the script because I still use it as my writing sample to get jobs. Like there's this brilliant exchange between the Ghost and Scrooge, where he's like, what do you mean by the afterlife? Is this sort of a tax dodge? And they get into this whole regression about taxes and him going, look, I wouldn't show up to haunt you in order to, look, are you expecting a day off? I don't need a day off. I'm dead. So we had this whole thing, and then it completely became this deconstructionist thing about him stopping the Ghost, and Scrooge learns absolutely nothing in it, but in a much more sharply focused comic way. Like, I went super, like, destroyed Dickens, but in the style of Victorian England. What came out the other side, they just sort of took a riff of my script, and I think they let the actors kind of do stuff, or the director had some other idea, and they leveled it out in a way where I was like, everything I wrote is there, but not there. Like, I had Dickensian names that were so ridiculous that it could often take 30 seconds to say them. You know, it was a great script. And the reason you're saying, I watched it and it was kind of flat, it's like, well, that's not the script I wanted them to make. And it wasn't what we pitched to them, which was, you know, I was doing a Python-esque version of the Dickens story where they prevented the ghosts from ever getting to him each time. And at the end, you know, he pretty much destroys the lives of Bob Cratchit and Tiny Tim and everyone. And he's like, this is fantastic. Thank you, team. You know, and they're like, well, Merry Christmas. And it was perfect. It was beautiful. Yeah, they didn't make that one. So
it lacked the just that pure irreverence. Yeah. Well, you know, if you ever want to share that script.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what the legal is on it, but I just pulled it up on my computer just now because I was talking about it. I'm like, oh God, I love that. Yeah, the Marley Scrooge exchange remains one of my absolute best things. I wonder, you know, if I accidentally read some of it to you. Let me see. Hang on one sec. Are we recording this as part of the...
Yeah, it's all recording, but...
Okay. Well, you know what? Screw it. Here we go. So this is what I had wanted. You tell me what you think, all right? Here we go. Interior Scrooge's office, night, darkness. Startled intake of breath. The sound of chains and metal. A crusty British man Scrooge, 50s, 60s, calls out, "How dare you disturb me at my work? Who is there in the darkness?" A candle is lit, revealing nervous old hands, stacks of ledgers, cash boxes and coins, the rumble of chains. A door closes with a creak, revealing the names Scrooge and Marley. Chains dragging get louder, a deep, resonant Englishman's voice. Jacob Marley bellows, "Scrooge, it is I, Jacob Marley, come to visit you on this Christmas Eve." Scrooge is puzzling at this mysterious figure of Marley, ghost covered in the chains and money bags. "I hope you shan't expect to be paid for this." "For what? Haunting you? No, I'm not expecting to get paid to appear as a doomed ghost, you miserable little man. I'm dead, Scrooge. You were at my funeral. In life, I was your business partner, Jacob Marley. Thou shalt be haunted by 3 ghosts this... What are you getting paid to do this haunting business, Marley? What? How lucrative can this haunting business really be? I mean, I realise you can't take it with you, but you can sort of, you know, make more once you're there. Look, I'm haunting you out of the goodness of my own heart, all right? Now shut up. Couldn't you do this during normal business hours? Of course I can't do it during normal business hours, you totty old ratbag. Oh, you're quite good, I'll give you that, if one appreciates this sort of thing, which I don't. Do you expect some sort of back pay at this juncture? What, you give me back pay for time spent dead? Not a chance. Now, if you expect a fee or holiday pay for appearing to me with a message on Christmas Eve after missing work for 7 years, just because you're dead, then I will say good night to you, sir. Good night to you, sir. So my fee is of more concern to you than me standing here warning you as a bloody ghost doomed to walk the earth in chains, covered in cash boxes, ledgers, deeds, heavy purses, wrought in steel. Scrooge wags his finger at him. He's sure he's caught him. So there was a fee! No, there's no fee. Look, it's simple. I am trying to take some time from purgatory to haunt you. Look, I've come here to tell you, Scrooge, that 3 ghosts shall appear to you and show you thine own past, present, and future. Those chains, are they an entirely necessary expense? I can't even see them in the dark. Look, will you shut up? Look, I'm about 1 second from making you a ghost, Scrooge. This is symbolism, you old covetous, tight-fisted miser. How about look, how would a ghost even want or spend money? Have you thought about it? I exist on an ethereal plane. I'm a phantasm. I'm an enormous sprite. An apparition. Well, that's all well and good. No, it's not all well and good, because I'm dead. Marley's had enough. He begins whirling in a circle with the chains whipping around the cash boxes, keys, heavy purses, and Scrooge. At Scrooge. Marley lunges at Scrooge, leaps away in terror into the dark as his candle is extinguished. And that would have been the opening. Wouldn't that have been great?
I was restraining the laughter because I didn't want to go over your talking.
See, that's what I wrote.
Yeah, that has
that would have been
Python-esque, yeah.
That was more what I was trying for.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Now you truly have an exclusive. So I performed that for the guys in the office, and we were laughing, and it felt right. I liked the beats in it, and I liked the character, and I love the idea that he's like, look, just shut up and let me haunt you.
The great thing about that is through the discussion, I mean, you zero in on Scrooge's character as being just completely concerned with money.
Yes. Yeah, it reveals character while still being wonderfully absurd, where he's more worried about amortizing the chains because he can't see them, and he's like, look, I'm a bloody ghost!
Yeah,
so,
he's like missing the point of it.
Is there back pay that's due? Yeah, so I mean, for me, this is just perfect, because British comedy is what I love to do, and that would have been the Scrooge episode.
I guess pterodactyls are okay.
Yes. Well,
Christmas,
John was
not
great.
British people.
John was right there, though. See, when pterodactyls were happening, John was there. And he was at the records, and he was involved, and John got it done right.
Right.
You know, there's a huge difference doing it. The only thing that makes the show interesting is if someone watches and goes, wow, I didn't expect that. That comedy is being surprised. You know, if you play it safe, you satisfy nobody.
I love the interruptions, too, where he's like, he's not following on the same track.
Yeah, exactly.
As Marley.
Yeah, you can just imagine cutting back to him and he's just sort of looking at him like, why can't you do this during normal business hours? It's like, no, I just said I'm a bloody ghost. And I tried to make every one of those insults is a corruption of a sort of Dickensian, toddy old rat bag and things like that. It's like that would have been in a Dickens dime novel back then.
Yeah.
And the whole script is like that. Like if you liked what you just heard, that's what I had wanted to make. And it was the last script I wrote for them.
Next time I see the episode, I'll probably take this audio and play it over
You should. I think I did
over the cold open.
I did it pretty clean, I think. You can definitely go for it, because it's, why not? What are they going to do, cancel it? If it had continued, there would have been more fun stuff like that. Where I was going with that Scrooge thing that I read you, it's sort of that meta feeling to it, but it's smart and it's satirical and absurd. It's just, that's the kind of stuff I love, and I think we could have had a lot of fun with that. To me, that's what kind of makes it all worth it when you're deep into a show that's been on and as successful as Scooby has been. If you can still surprise and do some fun stuff with it, in this case it's for comedy, in some other case, it could be like, oh, I've never seen a mystery done that way or whatever, but this show's about the comedic potential of it, and for me, I'm really proud of that, because when John and I set out to do something, it was, how can we put our own voice in it, and how do you surprise? Like, it's written for guys like you, who the most gratifying thing you say to me is when you're like, I didn't know where it was going, but I enjoyed the fact that I was off kilter, and I'm watching something that I've watched so much of, and yet I'm discovering new chestnuts. There's new stuff that I was like, I actually laughed, and that's why I do it. That's why I spend hours and hours writing it, is that one day you get that payback of the laughter is the payment. It's like hearing you laugh. I'm like, all right, that was worth the 2 a.m. rewrite, because why else? It's too much work to not enjoy it.
Well, if it's any consolation, just judging by the response that we see online and talking amongst ourselves in the community and just some of the random stuff that flies out there on Twitter, like, I think this show is going to be one of those things that, hits those lists where it's like you didn't know it existed, but you should.
Yeah. See,
I think history is going to look back very favorably on this show.
That's a badge of honor, and I'm really proud of that I could even be some part of that. And yeah, I would love for it to mean that if I could find a home where I could really do some damage for a couple years and do a show that was supported, and I would love to do it. I really appreciate you taking an interest in it. You've been a real champion, and if people become fans of my writing, it encourages me to do more, and it's a very hard and solitary thing to do. So it's nice to hear when someone goes, "Hey, I get it. I thought that was good," because there's really nothing more solitary than sitting and sort of giggling to yourself and writing alone, hoping that the rest of the world agrees with you.
You guys made the cult favorite of the big corporate IP.
Exactly. Yeah, we're making we unknown to even ourselves, we're making cult little indie shows at Warner Brothers. You never know.
So I'm not sure how much longer my Skype recorder is going to keep recording, but you have a book.
I do, and that was a fun challenge too. It arose out of Scooby. I actually got the book deal based on some of the mystery part of the scripts. They do young adult books. It's a company called Epic Press. And they had a series called Survive. And my friend Tanya put me in touch, and they said, look, here's the brief of some of what we'd like to do with it. And you do mysteries in Scooby-Doo, and you write for kids. This is a young adult, middle school, high school level, but we want kids to read. Do you have any ideas, that you want to pitch out of this? Is sort of our brief for the Survive series. So I came up with Red Skies. It's called Survive Red Skies. It's out on Kindle and also, I think, hardback for school libraries and things. And it's a throwback to, the 60s, maybe even the 50s adventure books for boys, where it's like it's two boys surviving at sea and their friendship is tested, and they learn about growing up and about why they kind of stop being friends. Like, particularly with guys, I noticed, like, you can hang out with a guy that you knew in first grade, and by the time you hit high school, you're not even sure why you're still friends. You can be so different, but you're friends because you've been friends so long. And this book kind of uses symbolism of the sea. I certainly had Melville in the back of my mind, where I'm like, even the name of the boat and then the payoff of it, everything kind of has a nice little symbolic thing that a reader, a young adult reader who's reading it, will get the story, which is a survival story. But beyond it, there's tons of symbolism in the story about life, about friendship, about resolving, long-standing conflicts internally as a person, getting your confidence back, externally in reconnecting with a friend or realizing you've outgrown a friendship. And so Red Skies is about a 2 or 3 day survival. These two boys take one of the boys' boat, his father's boat out, and they don't know how to sail. And they end up in a sea squall, and they both nearly perish and have to survive at sea. And they run into even modern day pirates and all kinds of things like that. And at the end of the day, it's about learning how little you need in life, not how much, in order to have a life that's meaningful. So it was a real fun challenge to write a proper book.
So is this like a one-shot thing, or is this just
I'll see how it sells.
Never thought of doing it before, and here's an opportunity.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, well, I've never done that before. It scares me. Yes, I should do that because I'm terrified. It was, it took about 3-4 months to write, intensely writing, because I had to do it on the side of everything else I was doing. But if it does well, and Book Buddy Media and Epic Press are happy with it, I would do another one. But you can get it on Amazon. It's called Survive Red Skies, and please write reviews if you read it.
I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I have been retweeting and sharing when I can.
Thank you very much. Yeah, again, it's a book written it's dedicated to my son, who is in middle school. He's in 7th grade. And to get you to read, it has to be something that interests you. It has to be something that, connects with you. And Red Skies, I was like, you know what? There's not a lot of books. Like, most of them are magic, or repurposing of Greek myths and things like that, or vampire tales and things like that. There's not a lot of books that are like the old Call of the Wild, or adventures for boys. These are two guys out there doing it, and girls can get something from it too. It's humans. But there's something special about that relationship that you have when you're growing up that I was like, you know what? I lived that. I know that. My dad actually was fascinated with boats, and he never was able to get one. We used to go down and look at them, and he would, know everything about the boat, but my mom always talked him out of buying it. So I think he always wondered. But I think for me, it was perfect symbolism living a dangerous time at sea to examine the relationship of these two boys, but also friendship and learning and how hard it is to grow up, and also to kind of admit sometimes when you don't know everything. And so Red Skies is about all of that, and I fought really hard to get all that symbolism in. And there's some humor in it as well, but it's a fairly serious sea adventure. And thank you for mentioning it. I hope people will seek it out, particularly if they have children, teens. That's exactly who it's written for.
It seems like you're in a pretty good place creatively right now.
Yeah, it's funny. It comes in fits and bursts. As an actor, I just booked a part on Louis C.K.'s new show, and then the book came out within a month of my feature being done. Isn't that weird? Like, you work on them for years, and then both come out within a month of each other. And so creatively, that's been gratifying, because you do all this work that nobody knows about, and you look like you're doing nothing. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you have a book. Oh, you have a feature film. Oh, you're on this television show. And it's like, yeah, only 3 years in the making. So yeah.
Like I said before, it's also nice that you have an adventure novel, you have a comedy animated series, you have a live action film noir movie, and you're going to be on a comedy show doing acting. Like, it's the whole, different genres. It's different. Yeah, it's not, you're not just, like I said, the comedy guy.
Yeah, and I think that's important. Like, I model my creativity a lot more after someone like Billy Wilder, who could do a comedy, could do Some Like It Hot one day and do Sunset Boulevard the next. And I think it's interesting to explore, and there's always humor, and it's just how it's applied. But I'm interested in a lot of stuff. I'm a fan of mystery and adventure and science fiction and all kinds of stuff. So you never know where it'll end up. But you're right. It's gratifying to not be. It's probably maddening to brand yourself this way, but it's gratifying as an artist to go, I have an adventure novel, I have a film noir, and I have a comedy series on Warner Brothers. And if you can do any of those halfway decent, it's really gratifying.
So there you have it, gang. The return of the one and only Tom Konkle, talking about Scooby-Doo and all the other stuff that he's doing. It was really great having Tom back. It was great touching base with him again. I honestly didn't know that we were going to get an interview out of this. I'd contacted Tom and asked him to come on and do another commentary, because Teletoon, of course, was showing Murder on the Disorient Express. It turned into quite a long conversation. Only half of what we talked about literally made it into the interview. So much was cut out for various reasons, but the conversation went on for some time. And as I said, it was really great touching base with Tom again. Things sound like they're going really well for him post Scooby-Doo. So if you guys want to help support Tom in his endeavors, as you heard in the interview, Trouble Is My Business, coming out April 18th, courtesy of The Orchard. And we have Survive Red Skies, his young adult adventure novel, which has come out from Epic Press, and that is available at Amazon. You can download it to your Kindle, and you can look forward to November 12th, which is going to come up faster than I like it to. And there's going to be a commentary for Murder on the Disorient Express. Another great commentary from Tom. I love putting these things together. Murder on the Disorient Express right now is one of my top 3 season 2 episodes. It makes me laugh all the way through it. If you've seen it, you probably know what I'm talking about. If you don't know, I'm not going to spoil it. It's crazy stuff. It's well worth the wait when you get to see it. And that pretty much wraps it up for me on this slightly premature, little bit early anniversary episode of A Podcast Named Scooby-Doo. Thanks for indulging me. If you want to get in touch with me or the show, you can get a hold of me on Twitter at FYC Show, Instagram, A Podcast Named Scooby-Doo. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, Stitcher and iHeartRadio, ScoobyDooCast@gmail.com if you want to send an email. I'm not sure why entirely, but it's there. You could use it. And lastly, as always, thank you guys for all your support, following the show, downloading the episodes, chatting with me online. The Scooby-Doo community out there is such a great fan community. Everybody's so knowledgeable and everybody's so hungry for Scooby-Doo stuff. So you guys kind of make this possible because sometimes they're kind of a struggle to get out there, and you guys make it all worthwhile. So until next time, we'll see you guys in November. Take care, and remember,
it's all about tactics.
Everybody cheer!
This is how we solve the mystery. This is how we solve the mystery.
So in summation, this narration is my donation to the art of mystery solving dictation. And here's what the bad guys say when they play where the law forbids.
Would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids.
This is how we solve the mystery. Bye.
There's a lot of meddling to do, and a lot of mysteries out there that need solving. Don't miss it!